Hi, everyone. I'm Marie Dorini. I'm the Paris director of the Institute for Ideas and Imagination. Welcome to Read Hall, where fellows, in addition to the work they do here, often volunteer to organize events. And tonight is a particularly rare one where you get to hear a translator who's translating a book talk to the author he's actually translating. So that's pretty cool. And Daniel is one of the most respected translators from French to English, sorry. He's translated Laurent Mauvignier, Éric Chevillard, Yakuta, Ali Kazazovic, and really takes enormous care in choosing the authors whom he translates. So obviously Nina would qualify as an exceptional writer, because you don't do anything but exceptional writers as an exceptional translator. And now they're going to talk about it. Voila. Thank you. And Daniel is the father of Ollie, who's 11th month old, but not here tonight.
But is totally real. Thank you, Marie. Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Nina, for coming to Paris for this event. It's such a pleasure to be sitting next to you and talking about this incredible novel, Double Nationalité, which, if you were here in November for my lecture about translating the book, you will remember sounds like this when dropped on the floor. That wasn't actually that satisfying, but it's a big book. It's 684 pages in this original French edition. It is absolutely riveting, and it is so hard to translate, and I'm having so much fun. And instead of trying to hold you to account for the torture, I just want to talk to you about the joy of this book. And maybe we can start by talking a little bit about, I know novelists tend to hate the question, what is your book about? But just give us some general context about what's happening in this book.
So thank you for this invitation. I'm so happy to be here. And just as a side note, I would say that writing this book was the same, like a lot of joy and a lot of torture. So we shared this experience. About the book, yes, it's hard to summarize it, but I would say that it was a very long process to write it. Like, there was 10 years between the idea of this book and between the point at the end of the text. And during these 10 years, many things changed. So at the very beginning, I had this feeling that I have something to tell to the world about my personal experience, about being Hungarian and French, or having two identities, two passports, two languages, and many things in double. So it's a book made from a biographical material, but in the same time, I really wanted to write literature and not just a report about this situation, like, hello, my name is Nina, I was born in France from Hungarian parents. Like, why not? It can be interesting, but I wanted to write something more challenging. And at the end, I would say that there was two turning points, like when I had this personal material and this personal situation. First, when I decided that it will be the story of a woman who is amnesiac, because it's changed everything. Like, it means you don't tell the story in a chronological way, because it means you start at the end of the story and you try to understand what happened before. And the other important things was to change the grammatically which person I use. So I did not write it in I, but in you. So it's you do this, you look to yourself in the mirror, and many things. So it was two very important turning points.
I think it's something you hear fiction writers talk about a lot, is like what a radical change it is when you're working on a story and you go from first person to third person or third person to first person. It really changes everything. But such a rare, tiny percentage of writers finds that gear in the middle, the second person. And it really does change so much about the book.
Yeah, it's I don't know the first chapter. Actually, I wrote it in I. So, but only the first one. It's when I tried, but not the whole chapter, like I don't know, the half of the first chapter. And after I was like, let's try with you what will happen. And I liked it so much. And the first inspiration was there are these novel Choose Your Own Adventure, and I thought it will give an atmosphere, I don't know, something exciting, and because I knew it will be, in a way, a very serious novel about serious topics, about geopolitics, about national identity and everything, and I wanted to balance this with something which is more playful and which is like which could be exciting. So it was the first thing, but after, when I was thinking about this choice, and also, of course, when the book was published, I had a lot of questions about, but why this you? And I have to try to say something smart about this. So my smart answer to this question is that also the you is the word you use when you look at yourself in the mirror and you are talking to yourself, and it's also a book about an internal investigation. So I think it reflects this aspect.
Mm. Yeah, we'll talk maybe a little bit later about some of the things that are possible to do in French that aren't possible in English. One of them is vous, which of course means both a plural you, like you, multiple people, but also you in a formal sense. And it's pretty clear that this book is about a single person, and so we can talk about why it's vous and not tu. But also there is sort of floating above the text, there's this more universal you, the reader, you, anyone reading this book, who may not share this experience of double nationality, but there are some points that you may be able to relate to.
Yeah, and also I said now it's written in you, but in really it's written in vous, and it became vous, you with Daniel. So it's we are now at one of the problem of the translation. Like in English, it sounds a bit different.
Before we get there, I want to piggyback on your point about the Choose Your Own Adventure novel, which is to talk about the way that the book was reviewed in French. It was received really well, and it won the Prix de Flore, one of the first years that prize existed, I think.
No.
No. Okay.
Sorry.
Well, so much for that theory. But reading some of the reviews of the book, I was really struck by how, although everybody liked it, nobody could really seem to agree on what kind of thing to compare it to. So somebody said it's like a choose-your-own-adventure novel. Somebody said it's like a point-and-click video game. Somebody said it's like a philosophical fable. It's like a spy thriller. And Frédéric Beigbeder, who created the Prix de Flore, in his long, very praising review of it, said it was like a fusion of Proust and Kafka, but then also talked about the 2009 movie The Hangover. So I think that gives you a sense both of how unclassifiable the book is, how much it contains, how many different styles and spirits it embodies, but also, in that last point, just how much fun it is. Because to your point, it is about these very heavy themes. It's about nationalism and geopolitics and the search for identity, but it's also so funny. And every day that I work on it, I am in awe of how you manage to balance these things.
So about the reception of the book, I was very happy about this very, I don't know, diversified reception, because it reflects what I wanted to do. So I could say I had several goals, and you can see the book as something made of different layers. So maybe one of these layers is that I wanted to do something which plays with references to detective novels, but which is not a true detective novel, because here you have an investigator, but the object of the investigation is the investigator itself. So it's something is wrong because normally you have something suspected of somebody suspected of something and an investigator. So it was the first thing I wanted. The second one was I wanted to give a precise description of this situation of what is to be a child of migrants and somebody who come from an Eastern European country in a Western European country. So all this, what can you say about this situation? So there is, we could say, a sociological aspect, like to describe very precisely this reality, because I was annoyed and upset by some discourses about these topics. So I wanted to answer or to say something about this. And maybe the third goal was, maybe it's a bit pretentious, but I had in mind to do something which is connected to philosophical tales, like in the Voltairean style, because this amnesiac woman, because of the amnesia, she's in a way similar to a child, like she's very surprised, and also I think it helps to make the text comic, because it means in many situations she is surprised by things which does not surprise normal people. So it was, and also it's connected to, I don't know, more serious topic like capital punishment or the colonialism. So all these topics are in this. So she looks to this question with this fresh gaze. I hope.
Yeah, and with total sincerity. That's one of the things that's really impressive to me, is that I think the amnesia is such a clever way into this nexus of associations, because she doesn't know from context what theory or what hypothesis is plausible and what's ridiculous. So she's treating everything that comes across her mind with utter sincerity. And the example that I like to give is from the first chapter, where she's at the airport and she looks at herself in the mirror and she says something like, if you didn't know any better, you would think you would say you're dressed like a prostitute. And then she pauses and says, well, maybe you are a prostitute, just because you're at the airport. Like maybe you're here in Paris on a prostitution tour. Like you can make more money here than you would back in Eastern Europe working because you can charge more. And then she pauses again and she's like, but you don't necessarily have to be here for work. Prostitutes get to take vacations too. And it's just this endless chain of very patient, very open-minded evaluations of situations and propositions that are sometimes totally absurd.
And maybe you could now tell us about how you became the translator of this book?
Sure, yeah. So I run a small publishing company called Fern Books with my wife, and small and slow. We started during the pandemic and we've published 3 books so far. And Double Nationality will be our 5th. And we found it, all of the books that we've done so far have been translations from French. And we found Double Nationalité because it got what's called a French Voices grant. The French book office in the US makes funding available to, I think, maybe 10 books a year that a translator can apply and say, I would like funding to translate this book. And if the book is chosen, then the translator gets money and the publisher gets money to make the book happen. And so we found this on a list of that year's grantees, maybe 2022, 2021 or 2022. And I think the grant by then had already expired. And so we couldn't have gotten money even if we worked with the translator who had chosen to apply with it. But I started reading the book and I absolutely loved it. And initially my thought was, I know I want to publish it and maybe I want to translate it, but maybe it's fine if somebody else translates it. And as I read, and I think as I started thinking more seriously about what it would be like, how one would do it in English, I just found that I had very strong opinions about how it should be done. And that to me is a pretty good sign that either I do it myself or I am an absolutely insufferable editor to work for. So better, sort of like the investigator investigating themselves, better to be the absolutely insufferable editor of myself than of a poor, unsuspecting other person. And then the last piece in the puzzle is this fellowship, which gives me time and space and funding to work on this book, which otherwise, if I were just translating it in my own time, it's a massive book. To do it in my spare time without any guarantee of money would be sort of even stupider than many of the business undertakings I launch into as a publisher. So this was really a unique and precious opportunity to do it and say, okay, I have support to do it. It's going to be possible, and I can take 9 months, and this is going to be what I'm doing, and also, you know, raising a tiny baby. But professionally, this is what I'm doing. Should we read a sample? I think maybe the first one that we've chosen to bring out what we were talking about before around just this absolute earnestness with which the main character thinks about things. This is a scene where she is thinking about the privilege of being human, and we're just learning about something that's happening in her mind as she has this thought, and she's walking down the street thinking about this. So Nina's going to read it in French, and then I'll read where I'm at right now in my translation.
Vous poursuivez votre promenade tout en continuant également à cheminer dans votre entendement. C'est une merveilleuse harmonie entre vos jambes et vos pensées. On dirait un spectacle de natation synchronisée. Au sein de votre esprit, le terme « privilégié » provoque une agitation. Privilégié d'être née humaine, fort bien, mais est-ce vraiment tout ? Vos pensées dansent autour du terme « privilégié », l'examinent, le questionnent. Tu ne serais pas un mot important, toi, des fois ? Tu ne serais pas un indice clé, toi, des fois ? Certaines se blottissent contre lui, mettent le nez dans son manteau de fourrure, car le terme privilégié est habillé très chic, forcément. Purée de protons, mais c'est horrible s'il porte de la fourrure. Vous n'êtes pas du tout d'accord pour la fourrure. C'est bien la peine d'être végétarienne si c'est pour héberger dans votre tête des participes passés substantivés vêtus d'une chose aussi barbare que la fourrure. Vous retirez délicatement son manteau de fourrure au terme privilégié. Bien sûr que la fourrure c'est joli, bien sûr que c'est agréable, mais tant de souffrance derrière. Non, vraiment, ce n'est moralement pas défendable la fourrure. Qu'il ne vous en veuille donc pas. Vous, face à la fourrure, vous voyez le sang, vous entendez les cris. « Oh, il est tout nu en dessous, pardon, vous n'oubliez pas. Non, ça va, il n'y a pas de mal, cela ne le dérange pas le moins du monde. » Avec le terme « privilégié » qui désormais se tient sur votre écran mental dans le plus simple appareil, vous discutez cause animale. Vous lui faites un petit cours. Il existe des poissons ultra intelligents, les dindes sont très affectueuses, les vaches laitières ont une vie atroce, les poussins mâles de la race des pondeuses sont broyés vivants. Cependant, comme vous êtes un peu agressive, il prend peur et il s'enfuit. Arrêtez de le culpabiliser ainsi, ce n'est pas de sa faute toutes ces histoires et puis manger de la viande est naturel, la preuve, les hommes préhistoriques. Mais après réflexion, il revient. Il a eu le temps de visionner 248 vidéos en ligne sur les abattoirs. Il a réalisé que vivre comme les hommes préhistoriques impliquerait de jeter son smartphone. Il a découvert qu'il adorait les haricots et les lentilles. Bref, il est totalement convaincu. Si l'on ne mange pas les handicapés mentaux, il convient de ne pas non plus manger les animaux. C'est une question de cohérence. Et aussitôt, il procède à un réagencement radical de son mode de vie. Il ne consommera plus aucun produit animal. Le véganisme est l'avenir de l'humanité éclairée. En tant que vocable d'élite, il se doit d'être à la pointe du progrès moral. Quant au côté luxe et paillettes, pas de souci. De nos jours, il existe d'élégants et fort coûteux sacs à main en faux cuir. Il pourra donc continuer à se distinguer socialement. Là-dessus, il s'éclipse. Non qu'il ait soudainement été saisi de honte de se trouver nu devant vous, il vous le répète, vraiment il n'y a aucun problème avec cela. Au contraire, il passe toutes ses vacances dans des campings naturistes, ce qui du reste prouve qu'il n'est pas si snob, qu'il n'est pas toujours en train de jouer au golf ou de voler en hélicoptère. Non, c'est plutôt qu'il a hâte d'aller faire du shopping à Londres pour se racheter une garde-robe exempte de produits animaux. Il reste le terme privilégié. Ne l'oubliez pas, vous ne pouvez pas non plus attendre de lui qu'il devienne subitement décroissant ou anticapitaliste. Il y a des limites à tout.
I feel I should point out that that is a total of 5 sentences. As you continue your stroll, you progress in your understanding as well. There is a marvelous harmony between your legs and your thoughts. It's like a synchronized swimming performance. Inside your mind, the word privileged is causing a commotion. Privileged to have been born human, yes, very good, but is that really all? Your thoughts are dancing around the word privileged, examining it, questioning it. You wouldn't by any chance be an important word, would you? You wouldn't by any chance be a key index, would you? Some of them are huddled up against it, sticking their noses in its fur coat, because of course the word privileged is very chicly dressed. Oh, puree of protons, that's horrible. If it's wearing fur, you're not at all okay with fur. What's the point of being vegetarian if you're just going to have nominalized past participles in your head wearing something as barbaric as fur? You delicately remove the word privileged's coat. Yes, of course the fur is pretty, of course it's nice, but with so much suffering behind it, really it's just not morally defensible. Fur isn't. So you hope it won't be mad at you. When you look at fur, you see blood, you hear screams. Oh, it's not wearing anything underneath. Sorry, you didn't mean to. No, it's okay, no harm done. It doesn't mind one bit. You and the word privileged, which is now standing on your mental screen in the altogether, discuss the animal cause. You give it a little lecture. There are fish that are ultra-intelligent. Turkeys are very affectionate. Dairy cows have an atrocious life. The male chicks of egg-laying hens are crushed alive. But because you're going at it a bit aggressively, it gets scared and runs off. Stop making it feel so guilty. None of this is its fault, and also eating meat is natural. Just look at prehistoric man. But then after some reflection, it comes back. It's taken the time to watch 248 online videos about slaughterhouses. It's realized that living like prehistoric man would mean throwing away its smartphone. It's discovered that it loves beans and lentils. In short, it's totally convinced if we don't eat the mentally disabled, it's only right that we not eat animals either. It's a question of consistency. And right then and there, it radically reorients its lifestyle. It shall no longer consume any animal products. Veganism is the future of an enlightened humanity. It has a duty as an elite vocable to be in the vanguard of moral progress. As for the glitz and glamour of it all, no worries. These days there are elegant and very expensive purses made of fake leather, so it can go on distinguishing itself socially. On this, it slips away, not because it was suddenly overcome with shame at being naked in front of you. It reiterates, really, it has no problem with that at all. In fact, it spends all its vacation at nudist camps, which also proves it's not a snob. It's not always playing golf or flying around in helicopters. No, it's just that it's eager to get to London to go shopping for a new animal-free wardrobe. It's still the word privileged, and don't forget it. You can't just expect it to suddenly become a degrowther or an anti-capitalist. There are limits to everything. So that is a long, wonderful, sumptuous paragraph in which nothing happens but a woman having a conversation in her mind with a word that she thought a few minutes before. And, you know, thinking about asking what happens in this book, there are a lot of things that happen in this book. There is a narrative arc that is very honorable in terms of, you know, point A to point B, but there's just so much density of thought and invention inside at every moment. It's just really spectacular. So one thing that we haven't talked about yet, and something I think is really novel and cool about the book, is that sometimes I talk about how the narrator of the book is, like you, Franco-Hungarian, French-Hungarian, except that's not totally true. Because for the parts of the book that take place in France, she's French and Yazigian, or Yazigian, I can never decide, and you will not tell me which way I should say it. Which is to say, there's a second country, her other nationality is a fictionalized version of what we eventually, or if we look at your biography, sort of start to surmise is Hungary. And then, later, when the character leaves Paris and goes back to her other country, a new section of the book begins, and she's not in Yazigia, she's in Hungary, and the place that she's just come from is not France, but Lutringia. So, in this very simple, but I think quietly mind-blowing way, only the place where the character is in the moment is real. And that's, I think, a great example of a way of talking about geopolitics in a really clever, inventive way without belaboring the point, without being too serious and gloom and doom about it. So can you talk a little bit about what it was like to invent a country? or invent two countries. Although, to my mind, by the time we get to Hungary, when we look back at l'étranger, it's kind of obvious. It's more obvious that that's France than it is au départ that Yazigia is Hungary. So what was it like to make up a country, a tradition, a language, a sort of a history?
So yes, so the book is about somebody who has two citizenship and two identities, but there are 4 countries in the book. And as Daniel said, there is at the beginning there is France, and the other country is Yazigian, and after it changed and we are in Hungary, and the other country is l'étranger. I did this because I had the feeling that it's in a way we can say it's not true, because in reality we have only 2 countries, but I think it expressed the fact that a country is never the same if you are there or not, and so that especially for migrants, for example, if they live, I don't know, in another country than their native country, the country of origin can become a kind of fiction, especially if they spend a lot of times, like, I don't know, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years. And so it's, I would say it's something like, Aragon wrote a lot about this mentir vrai, so this true lying. So I felt it's the way to express something which is true, like it's more true in this way with this fictive version of the countries than if I use the real country. It was the first reason. The second one was I really wanted to be free about what I write about both country, and it's much more easy to be free if I write about Yazigia and not about Hungary. So I can say many things, because if I write only about Hungary, many people will come like, it's not true, in history it didn't happen in this way, and blah blah blah. And it was not about give the truth about the historical events, but share some experience about what is to look to this country from France, and how was it and also the opposite for the same thing for France. And yes, how was it to build it? I don't know, it's very easy, because I just have to, I had a lot of fun. And just I had to make some exaggerated things. So I don't know. I felt really like I described some reality. So it was not, of course, about many things. It became a bit absurd or comic. Especially about Yazigia, but it was not so hard. Just I take some real points in the reality, and I make them much more bigger. So it's not exactly a caricature, but something like this. And I would say it's like a dream about the country. So I don't know. I didn't work like a Tolkien who, really built a country in a very systematic way. It was a more intuitive process about what I can, I don't know, feel with my sensitivity about each country.
I think if you're willing, this would be a great moment for you to read some of the oaths and obscenities that happen in the book.
Okay.
This is not at all an exhaustive list, but some of the ones that I was able to inventory, and for which I will say right now, I still have no idea how I'm going to handle them.
So it's a long list of insanity. Nom d'une cuisse de caribou, nom d'un érable radioactif, nom d'un panais cosmopolite, nom d'un radis en double fil, nom d'un escarpin triple bouilli, nom d'un épi de maïs, nom d'une bouilloire diatonique, nom d'un goéland pouilleux, nom d'une manivelle à pois, nom d'une cuillère en bois, nom d'une crosse frigorifique. Espèce de paquebot à pédales en fonte, espèce de grosse feignasse goudronnée, espèce de pomme de terre galactique de permafrost, espèce de barbare en gants d'émail, espèce d'inconsciente herpétique, d'irresponsable carabiné, espèce de topinambour déshydraté, espèce de sotte patriarcale, d'idiote emplafonné, espèce de salicorne des marais putrides, 1000 milliards de monocytes, par les 67 satellites de Jupiter, horreur de silicate damocloïde, bordel de missiles à yaourt, purée de protons.
Thank you. It occurred to me while you were reading that there was a rhyme in there somewhere that you could. There was a rhyme in there. The
Yes, I saw.
manivelle à pois, une cuillère
yeah.
en bois. It could be just assemble these as a poem. To what end, I don't know. But so yeah, like there's this really joyful sense of invention, even if it's not, as you're saying, this sort of science fiction world building. But there is what feels very much like, and there are these references sometimes to how, you know, Yazigians invented computer programming in the 12th century, and they have this lofty history of Fields medalists, and there's, you know, there's clearly thought that went into the kind of people that this people is. And I think that's really fun to think about trying to transpose into English.
And so maybe you could describe us your way of working in general. I don't know, like how do you, because now we spoke about some specific challenges, but maybe you could tell us how is your translating process?
Yeah, so my translating process, which is laborious but fun, is I think about it in like 3 steps. It's sort of simplistic, but think of the first step is translating, the second step is writing, and the third step is reading. So when I do a first pass, my only goal is to take all of the words in French and replace them with words in English. So I'm not thinking about style. I'm not thinking about voice very much. If I come up with a turn of phrase that I like, then that's great, but I don't force it, and I also probably won't keep it through after subsequent revisions. So the result of that first pass is a very crappy, but in English, version of the book. And I will say one thing that I'm doing with this book that I've never done before is I'm going chapter by chapter. So instead of translating the entire book all the way through in a first pass, and then starting again from the beginning with a second pass, there are 36 chapters in the book, and my goal for this fellowship, which lasts roughly 36 weeks, was to do chapter 1, Monday, write a first draft, Tuesday, start revising it, get as far as I can, refining and polishing it until Friday, and then next Monday, first draft of chapter 2, and so on. That has not worked. It is not going efficiently. So right now I'm much farther into the first pass than I am into the second. I'm about twice as far. But the second pass, which I've done in the first 2 big sections of the book, so about 250 pages, is where I start to really think about how would I write this like a writer? How did you write it as a writer? Because you are clearly a very deliberate and careful and talented writer, and you made decisions and you didn't do things by accident. But what do I want it to sound like? What is the voice I'm going to find for how it sounds in English? And so this process takes probably 3 times as long on average as the first pass, because even though in a sentence, and as we've seen, some of the sentences can be very long, what's happening, quote unquote, is the same. None of the words feel right. And so this is the phase where I'm trying to be responsible for what feels right. And does the sentence start to have a similar music to yours? Correcting for some of the differences between French and English, because French, in a lot of cases, takes longer to say things than English does. And so it's okay if something that you wrote that has 12 words only has 5 words in the way I write it. But still, what is that? What is the flow? What is the balance? And it's also where I start to think about how am I going to translate espèce de whatever, goudronné. But still, even in the second pass, I'll be like, well, I'll take care of that in the third pass. So there are still some some highlighted parts that I will get to later. And then the third pass, so if the first two is translating and then writing, and the third pass is reading. And I try as much as possible not to look at the original. I try not to look at the French. I try to read it as though I haven't just spent a long time laboring over every word decision, and think, if I was just coming to this text now, what would be missing? What would I not be able to understand? What are there things, whether they're cultural references or just a way that the sentence is constructed, that just are not self-evident. And that I haven't really done that except for the first maybe 2 or 3 chapters in this book, but that is closer to, it's quicker. You know, the second is the longest, and the third I can try to read as though I was reading somebody else's book and just underline the things that bother me. But of course, because it's me and because I'm an insufferable editor of myself, you know, sometimes I'll take an hour to get through and get through one page. But it always feels, and you know, we picked a few passages that we were going to read tonight. You were going to read the French, and I, looking over where I had arrived, all the passages that we have read or are going to read are from the section that I've done 2 passes of. And even so, this morning I changed a ton of things. So the third phase is not going to be smooth sailing. There's going to be a lot of revision still. One question that another one of our fellows had when I was talking about this in November was what the influence of the Hungarian language is in this book. As somebody who doesn't speak Hungarian, I'm not really qualified to speak to it, but I think of it as a book that is so very French. Like, it inhabits the French language so fully, and you work in all of these different registers. It's very romantic and lyrical, and then sometimes it's very colloquial and demotic, and sometimes it's very dramatic and overblown, and sometimes it's really subtle. And so I think of it as sort of like taking French for a test drive and showing all of the things that it can do in all of its various registers. But I realize that I don't know how much Hungarian is present in it.
It's hard to say, but there is one answer I like to give, and it can be one possible answer, that also in the novel, the main character writes every day. So she writes a diary on a notebook, and finally we understand that this notebook, she bought it in Hungary. And so about the novel itself, maybe we could say it's a French novel, or at least French words on a Hungarian notebook. So there is this. So there is some mix, but not. But of course, about the style and all the languages may be very French, but in the same time, for example, all the sworn words. Is the way we say this. So my goal with this, it was fun to create all these sworn words, but also I wanted to give the impression that it's not a normal French, because you know, when you listen to a foreign language, what is hard to understand, or the clue about it's a foreign language is idiomatic expression and sworn expression, because this is not natural for you, or you will hear the first sense and not the figurative sense. So it's something which shows you that you are a stranger in regard of this language. So I wanted the reader has this feeling about maybe this is not a normal French language, or maybe it's a French not from France, from somewhere else. So it was also the goal I had, so making more a Francophone novel than a French novel. So of course the French language is very important, but not connected to France like
the hexagon.
As the hexagon, yes. Also, it's hard for me to decide what is Hungarian, what is French. Of course, there are some small games with Hungarian language you can understand only if you are Hungarian, but not so much. For example, I use some Hungarian idiomatic expression and translated in French, but you know, if you don't understand it, you can understand the novel, but there are some small, I don't know, private jokes for Hungarian people, we could say. But also, my feeling is that the structure, so if we don't speak only about the style, but the structure is probably very French. Also, I went to university in France, and I think my way of thinking, like, you know, this all big, this very rigorous way of, I don't know, build the hypotheses and after test them and everything. I don't say we don't have this in Hungary, but it's you can feel it's like a French dissertation more than a Hungarian one. So
yeah,
maybe
it's like a reductio ad absurdum of the way that you're taught to reason, in a way that you're taught to sort of process arguments in French, in France rather. That's fascinating. So one thing we haven't talked about yet is that you yourself are a translator. You are an interpreter and a translator. And you've told me that while writing this book, you often thought of your eventual translators. And what form did that thought take? Was it sort of like, if I phrase something this way, that will be difficult? Or was it more about putting yourself in the shoes of somebody who's translating a text like this?
It was, yes, because I told to Daniel, we had a phone call to prepare this event, and I told him that when I was writing the book, I was thinking a lot to the eventual translators. But for tell you the truth, it was more, I was thinking to them, like the fictive or potential translators, because it helped me to feel less alone with this work, because I had in mind that a translator could really understand this book, because he or she will read it in, I don't know, for me a translator is like a hyper reader or something like this. Like, you have really to have a very deep understanding of a text to be able to translate it, because you recreate in another language. So, and also because the book itself is a lot about languages, about translation, and I thought maybe this topic could be interesting for a translator, and maybe she or he will notice some small things a normal reader won't notice. So it was more about maybe somebody will like this, maybe a translator. So it was more about to have this super reader, super careful about the text than imagining the translation process. So sorry, it was not about your work. It was just for my ego. You know, it helped me.
It's fair. It's a good answer. Still, there are these mentions of a community of translators in the book where. In Paris, she has a lunch with translators from other languages, and there's this, it's not something you spend a lot of time talking about, but sort of this kindred, this community of people who are doing similar work.
Yeah, and I think in a more large acception, we could say that the situation of the main character, which is very similar to my own situation, like between two countries, two languages and everything, it's a situation when you are in the same time an insider in two places and an outsider all the time. So you will never be the 100% local person, because you will always be a bit strange, a bit different. And in the community of translator, you have really a lot of people like this, because usually translator, like at least change country or are really, I don't know, married with somebody from another country. So you have personal stories behind this, the choice of this profession, which makes me feel that with, I don't know, if you put many translators in the room, probably I will feel at home at this place more than in a, I don't know, monocultural place.
I think this tees us up well for another reading, which is a slightly less sunny view of the vocation. And this is when the main character has just gotten a phone call. She's still in Paris, and she's been called by somebody who wants her to translate a document relating to the sale of some pyrotechnic equipment. She's just thinking about whether or not translation is really something that suits her psychologically.
So, and just before reading, when the book was published, I was invited to ESIT, which in Paris is a very important, not exactly university, but a place where future translator and interpreter are trained and educated. And I read this to them also, and after we had a debate about is it true or not. So
excellent.
Just you can listen to it having this in mind. La traduction est une activité de copiste multilingue, d'imitatrice besogneuse, de pasticheuse captive. Il s'agit de mimer et de décalquer, de fabriquer des contrefaçons, de reproduire dans l'autre langue comme si cela avait été énoncé dans l'autre langue, sauf que non, c'est la traductrice qui parle. En silence, sous contrainte, ligotée par le texte source, condamnée à produire des discours mutiques, à exprimer sans jamais s'exprimer, à rédiger des écrits dont elle n'est pas l'auteur. Et l'interprétation orale est peut-être encore pire car le corps s'expose, on devient une doublure étrangère, une marionnette dont les propos sont dictés par autrui. Il faut savoir déclarer avec assurance « Bonjour, je suis une prostituée », alors qu'on ne l'est pas du tout. On est interprète et on trouve un peu bizarre de dire « Mon chiffre d'affaires, c'est surtout grâce à la sodomie. Les clients français sont très demandeurs, vous savez. » Bref, c'est pour les gens qui sont attachés à leur sécurité cérébrale, qui préfèrent qu'on leur prémâche leurs répliques, qui ne veulent pas prendre le risque de penser par eux-mêmes. Or vous avez bien vu que vous aviez besoin de vous exprimer, de vous engager, de prendre place dans le monde. La traduction, ce n'est pas du tout adapté à votre profil psychologique.
Translation is the occupation of a multilingual copyist, a plodding imitator, a captive pastiche artist, who mimics and traces, creates counterfeits, reproduces a thing in the other language as though it had been stated in the other language, except no, it's the translator who's speaking. In silence, under constraint, literally bound by the source text. Condemned to produce mute discourses, to express without ever expressing herself, to write writings of which she is not the author. An oral interpretation is maybe even worse because the body is exposed. One becomes a foreign stand-in, a marionette whose words are dictated by others. One has to be able to confidently declare, hello, I am a prostitute, when one isn't a prostitute at all, but an interpreter, who finds it slightly bizarre to say, my revenue is primarily from sodomy. Demand is quite high among French clients, you know. In short, it's for people who are wedded to their mental safety, who prefer their lines spoon-fed to them, who don't want to take the risk of thinking for themselves. And you, it's clear you need to express yourself, to commit, to stake your place in the world. Translation isn't suited to your psychological profile at all. We could have really just thrown a dart at anywhere in the book and read pretty much any paragraph and had just as much fun as these two that we've selected. It's just so filled with gems and challenges that are fascinating to talk about. Do you have any final thoughts that you want to share before we open it up to questions?
No, just maybe I was curious. It's really as the writer of the book, if now, because you work on the translation for 9 months, we could say this, like, is it a difference between what you would say is the most challenging about the translation now and between what you said 9 months ago? So what changed, or if something changed?
Yeah, that's a great question, and you sent it to me in advance, and I thought I had an answer, but now I find I'm gonna be improvising. I think I knew, I expected that it was gonna be full of complex propositions. It's not full of wordplay, and I've translated texts that are really full of wordplay, where you have to think of an equivalent of a pun at length several times in a text, and this isn't like that. This is on a slightly different level. That can be more challenging because puns are closer to something that they're closer to jokes or puzzles, that they have a solution. that you can find and say, you know, when it clicks, it clicks. Whereas these plays with registers there are a bunch of good solutions. And so the process of finding my voice speaking your words has been sort of a process of getting to know this like hybrid of you and me and saying which of these equally valid solutions is the best one that feels truest to this creature that exists between us. And I think that's gotten easier the more time I've spent with the text, because of course, like any good novel, it builds on itself. You know, there are things that seem strange at first, and then the third or fourth time they happen, they don't seem strange anymore. They seem like something that just belongs to the world of the novel. And so that's encouraging, that's getting easier. And yeah, I don't know. I think the challenges are pretty much the same as what I expected the challenges to be. Besides, I guess there's an external challenge, which is having a small child at home. And this is a text that lends itself really well to what I was talking to a friend of mine before my son was born, and she has a son who's turning 3, and she said one thing about parenting is you're no longer able to work fairly. You're no longer able to stay up until 3 in the morning eating popcorn for dinner, just laser focused on the thing that you need to get through, and you know, you'll sleep later and you'll feed the cat later, and you know, you just can't do that anymore. Or you could, but you can't decently, humanely do that anymore. And so having to do this text, even divided up into 36 chapters, or long chapters, having to do it in shorter chunks has been a challenge, because it often takes me, you know, maybe an hour to like feel like I'm getting back into the groove. And then once I'm there, things start to flow more easily. But getting there can be fraught with a lot of second guessing and questions and saying, yeah, it could be that, but it could just as easily be that, and I don't know which one is the thing that's true to this hybrid creature.
But I would say this time you need to be really in the text is the same when you are only writing, I mean not translating. I don't know, my experience of writing is the same, like, you know, I need time to...
Yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
And also I'm telling this because you are also a writer, so it's pretty similar. What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, translation for me is always sort of a joy, because it contains pretty much everything I love about writing, choosing words and thinking about the balance and harmony of a sentence. And it doesn't have the thing that I hate about writing, which is coming up with the thing that you say. But yeah, if I were trying to write a book, I think it would be the same challenges. Or maybe because it was my project, I would have ways of breaking it down into more fragmentary. You know, maybe the book that I chose to write would be something different as a function of where, you know, what my circumstances in life are right now. Maybe it would be a book with really short chapters or very fragmentary. But as it turns out, this is what I'm working on. No regrets. Do we have some questions from the audience?
Is there a point where the translator wants to get in contact with the writer to debate or discuss something?
Yes. In the fortunate situation where the writer is alive and amenable and available, which you check all 3 boxes, I think the moment is fairly late. I think the moment is like kind of close to the 3rd pass. Because a lot of the questions that I think I want to ask you are things that not only you could answer. Some of them, because I'm not a native French speaker, a lot of them are going to be, this is just an idiom I've never heard before, or this is a turn of phrase, this is a syntactical thing that I've never seen before. There was something, a chapter I was working on yesterday, like, I don't remember what it is, but it was an expression, and I looked it up, and it's an expression that I just never seen before. It was sort of arcane, I guess, but, and so I think out of courtesy to the author, you want to resolve as many of those questions as you can before you go to the author and say, okay, I know your time is valuable. Here are the X number of questions that nobody else in the world can answer. Whether it's, what did you mean? Why did you say this instead of this? Where you would expect this word, you have this one. Is that, here's my pet theory about why that is, or is it a misprint, or, you know. And I guess the other question is how well the author speaks the language you're translating into. Like, your English is very good, and so I know you have told me that you don't think your English is good enough to have strong opinions about whether I translate something this way or that way, which will probably end up being a blessing to me because, you know, I don't have to wonder. It feels like carte blanche to me, whereas I've worked with writers who are themselves translators from English into French, and they have strong opinions, and it works out great. It has worked out great in my experience, but it doesn't necessarily work out great. But being able to not have to start from scratch in describing to you why I can't say, like, there's something that we didn't talk about that I think is really interesting, is the French on, the pronoun which translates to one, but is used in a lot of other ways, like on y va means let's go, or you can use it in generalized, saying quand on est femme, on n'oublie pas, to take an example. When you're a woman, you don't forget.
Also as impersonal, like on frappe à la porte, it's
Right.
we don't know who.
Yeah,
so-
it sort of removes specific data about the person doing the thing, but it can be used when it's a generalization. To my ear, it is translated best into English as you, like when you're a woman, you don't forget. When it's on est très content, it can be oui, but one of the particularities of this text, unlike many others, is that you is already taken, because there's the vous that is specifically the main character. And so I can't say, when you're a woman, you don't forget. I have to say, women don't forget. Or when one is a woman, one doesn't forget. I have to find a solution like that. And it's nice that you understand that. I don't have to say, okay, so here is a big fundamental difference between our languages. Sorry, that was a very wandering answer. But yes, there's I think always a moment.
Hi, I'm just curious, so maybe this is a more general question about translation, but like, it seems like a very personal text, and how can you as a translator be sure that the story that you've read is the story that she wants to tell, and then make sure it's told faithfully with something so personal?
Would you like to field this one? I mean, the short answer is I can't. You know, when you start to read translation theory, which is not something I do a ton of, but like almost every metaphor of translation is about failure. It's about failing in the most eloquent, most like good-hearted, earnest way possible. And I think, you know, part of it is just picking texts that you feel really resonate with you, and that even though my experience, I don't have double citizenship, I grew up in America. I was born in America to American parents, and so there are some things that are just off limits to me. But I have this feeling that the text speaks to me in a way that's beyond what the story it's telling. It's the way that it's telling it that I feel. It's a music that I hear, and I feel like I can sing it back. And it's after that, it's just kind of a leap of faith.
And what I can say about this is, like, of course, if you give this book, and it's true for every book, to 10 translators, you will obtain 10 different translations for sure. So there is no one good solution. But I think it's part of the game. Like, it's for me, I'm just curious and interested by this version of the text, and in my mind, it's Daniel's project. So I'm here. I can answer to questions, and I will be excited to discover the result. But I have no problem about it's one possible version, and it's also, as I told at the beginning, I worked on this novel 10 years, so a lot of time, a lot of energy, you can imagine. Now I work on something else, and it's also very, I don't know, it gives me a kind of, insight piece to think now it's not my work, and the book continue its life in Daniel's hands, or also other translators' hands, and or other projects. So it's a nice feeling to say, in a way, goodbye to the book. Like, it's not exactly my work now. It's something just I'm here to, I don't know. Yes, I can help in the process, but it's not my responsibility. So, I can be relaxed.
The book has gone off to London to shop for a new animal-free wardrobe.
Since you both are translators, have you? It's a question for you two, differently. Have you experienced through the work you translate? I'm not speaking about the work itself, but through it, a relationship with the author of the book or of the text or whatever. Like, for instance, this book it's a big book. It's 600 pages, you said. So after such a long work, have you experienced a relationship with the author? And I don't know whether you knew each other before or not, but in particularly in the case that you don't know personally the author. Do you understand my question?
I think so. We didn't know each other before. We met in October, and we started corresponding when my wife and I bought the rights to the book in English. And now we have a relationship insofar as we're sitting here side by side on stage right now. And I think our relationship will continue and deepen to some extent when I'm ready to ask you questions. And then in my capacity as publisher, you will have a relationship with Christina and me where, we get into the less fun business of, making and selling the book. But I think maybe what I'm hearing you ask is there a relationship that emerges between us that is almost independent of us as people?
I could be more precise. Like, what? Maybe it depends on the particular work you do, but sometimes, for instance, would you consider the author of the book as your sister or brother? I mean, or someone you love, or someone you hate, or someone you think, or you're like an student of, whatever. You see what I mean?
Yeah, I think I get it better. I think the student relationship is closest. I think it's like student, but also host, in the sense that I am a parasite, and just sort of like trying to live in, not even in Nina's brain, but the brain of this book, like the brain as it is manifested in this 684 pages of what I think is brilliant exposition and insight. There's like this weird mind meld almost, if you're doing it well and joyously. I think like it can turn to hate if, I think you've probably translated bad texts before, especially, like the texts that we translate not for pleasure, for work, for money, like, are not always good. And the more time, if you're spending more time thinking about how somebody is expressing themselves than they did when they expressed themselves, then that's a recipe for a sort of antagonistic relationship. But I think what's going on here, and I would love to hear how you respond to this, but is sort of like, I feel like I have the privilege of, not to be too leading with the word privileged, I have the privilege of entering something that I really admire, and I want to understand how it works better. And because it's a text that I get to ask questions of through reading and writing, and not yet actually asking Nina questions, I can take my time, and I can sort of have my own contradictory opinions and learn from them. And then I guess maybe I feel a little bit sheepish and starstruck when I talk to you, because I'm like, you have done this, and this has given me so much sort of nourishment and excitement, and like I wonder what I'm bringing to the conversation besides like, on page 342 you say this, and I wonder if, but I think at best, and so far at least, it's been an ideal collaboration. It is a real generous exchange. That is not like being a sibling. It's not like being a family member or even a friend. It's something more, I'm going to say cosmic, even though I want to roll my eyes at that word choice. But you understand. I feel like we've given you many angles on what it's like to roll your eyes at your own word choice as a translator. I've talked about it.
No, what I can say about this is, like, for me, it's in the same time a bit surprising, like somebody decides to work, to put so many energy and time in translating this book. I'm very happy with this, but also, nobody forced you, like put a gun to your head to say you have to translate it, and you, as a free man, you decided to spend a lot of time with this text, and I feel it's a kind of honor, like for me, like somebody wanted to do this, and I feel this with all because the book was translated also in other languages, so I had this feeling with all the translators, and I know, like, it means you really live with the text when you are translating it, and I moved about this, like somebody choose to really, I don't know, live with these things. I put so much of me inside and so much work, and so it's nice to, I don't know, yes, it's it's a pleasure to think about this, but I wouldn't say it means we will have a very specific relationship. Like we can we could talk about details in the text, and I can answer to Daniel's question. But as I told previously, I think now it's his project, so I'm just I feel I'm in the coulisses and just looking like, is everything okay? And I'm here if you need something, but that's all.
I'd be interested to hear you talk about what it's like as an interpreter, because that's a very different, like, you are standing right there in front of a person and speaking. Like, oral interpretation is something I am utterly incapable of even conceptualizing how I would do. Like, it's just, my brain does not work in that way, and so I'm endlessly impressed by people who can sort of listen and translate and speak in the space of seconds. But I imagine that in addition to the really impressive kind of technical prowess that you need to do that successfully, that there is some sort of, you talk about it a little bit in the book, there is some sort of like spiritual convergence, to use another phrase that I want to roll my eyes at. There's a sort of like a mingling of persons.
But I think also as an interpreter, you don't have time to think about the situation, just you have to do. So you have to accept not to be a perfectionist, at least for the interpretation. Translator can be a perfectionist. The interpreter has to accept, okay, I have 2 seconds to find a solution which could be acceptable. So it's a very different mindset. But I think, yes, it's also, which is similar, is the empathy you have to feel. Because I think you can be a good interpreter or a good translator if you can imagine yourself in the same situation as the person who speaks or who writes.
So my question is for Nina. Like you spoke a lot about setting the text free in the hand of the translator, but since you know and speak Hungarian so well and it's so personal to you, how would you feel? For my knowledge, there is not a Hungarian translation for this book yet, but how would you feel about it? Are there any plans or possibilities? Or just like how would you feel the same in the process as, for example, as you have described for other translators, or would it be necessarily different because it is your native language?
In an ideal situation, I would feel the same, but what could be difficult is very probably a Hungarian translator or a Hungarian publisher would expect more than from me. So probably it would be more about how to say no and how to stay at the author's place and not to become a co-translator, which I really don't want. So it's, but yes, so it's. There was some short translation, so extracts were translated, or also I have some short stories translated in Hungarian, so I have a small experience about what is this situation. And it worked well when just the translator translated it, and so in really with the same way of working together, like I'm here for questions, but I really don't want to be the writer of the translation.
A question about the things which are translated from very specific Hungarian puns or expressions. I don't know. You told about that before.
The inside jokes.
The inside jokes, the private jokes. Is it important that you tell Daniel about that, or is it important that it doesn't get lost? He cannot, I suppose, unless he speaks Hungarian, he cannot know what it is. So is it a case where it's impossible to translate without the author?
Yes, it's a good question. I think we cannot avoid that we will lose this. But if he asks me here, is there something I have to know? So if maybe he feels something, of course I will tell, yes, behind this sentence there is this idiomatic expression from Hungarian. But also in the text you have many things like this, but not connected to Hungarian, but connected to, I don't know, hidden references to other texts. For example, there is a sentence. It's you can only understand the hidden reference if you read a specific book and you have a very good memory. So maybe there is one person on earth who will get the reference, and so there are so many things like this. So I would say it's not specific to this to these games with Hungarian, but you have many things like this in the book. And also, I could say that it's from my experience with other translators that sometimes translators see references I had not in mind, and so maybe you lose some things like this, but you will win something else, and it's okay for me. Like it's what I was telling about. It's a new life for the text, and why not gain also some new games inside.
So there's nothing that if I miss it, that the text will be worse for it.
No, I don't think so. No, for me, the most important is the rhythm and the style, really, and so.
Thank you so much.